What if I told you there's a way to know every single time what your CMMC evidence assessor is looking for exactly and what they want to see? Because let's be real, you're not writing a $30, a $50, or $100,000 check to that C3PO to walk out of it and have it not met. And there actually is a way to know. And inside of that, every single objective contains one word, one verb that tells you exactly what evidence you need to bring. Hi, I'm William Price. I'm a lead CMMC certified assessor, and I spend my time helping defense contractors get ready before the C3PO shows up. And a while back, I sat with the level 2 assessment guide, and I went through every single one of the 320 plus objectives. I cross-referenced the example evidence given for each one, and there was a pattern that fell out. And I call it the CMMC Verb Test. It is the single most useful framework that I hand my clients, and by the end of this video, it's going to be yours too. Let me show you what I mean. Not too long ago, I ran a readiness assessment for a contractor, 500 employees, solid IT team, mature environment, and it was the final pressure test before their C3PO was going to show up for the real thing. And they'd been prepping for over a year, a long time, and they felt ready. But I found 23 objectives that were going to fail. Not because their security was weak, their security was really good. They were going to fail because they had the wrong evidence stage for what they should have had. A policy where an assessor would have wanted to see a configuration export. A screenshot where the assessor wanted to see a dated log. 23 times they did not have the match what the objective was actually asking for. And if they had known the CMMC verb test, every one of those would have been caught in their own preparation. So today, I'm going to give it to you. So let's get into it. First, we need to kill the biggest misconception in CMMC preparation. And I call it the 110 control myth. And it's everywhere. Vendors say 110 controls. Consultants put it on their websites. Even some C3POs gloss over it. And it's not wrong exactly. There are 110 controls. You see, the real test is a different document. And you might not have even opened it yet. Assessors don't score controls. Assessors score objectives. Each one of those 110 controls, they break down into anywhere from 1 to 10 or more individual assessment objectives. Every single one of them gets evaluated independently. You nail 5 out of the 6 objectives under that one control, that whole control is not met. You nail 5 out of the 6 objectives under a control, that whole control is not met. The whole thing. Think of it like hurdles. There are 6 1-foot hurdles in a row, and that is a completely different challenge than one 6-foot wall. You can't skip one of those hurdles and make up for it by clearing the others with an extra height jump, right? It doesn't work that way. So where do these objectives live? The CMMC Assessment Guide for Level 2. And it is built on NIST 800-171A, the assessor version of NIST 800-171. Go download it, look at it. It's in a link in the description. And here's what the CMMC Verb Test is all about. Every objective in that 171A has a keyword, a verb, and that verb maps directly to the type of evidence that you need to produce. Your assessors know this, and fortunately for you, after today, so will you. Now, we have documentation verbs or keywords. First bucket in the verb test. I call these the documentation keywords. When one of these verbs shows up in an objective, your assessor wants to see a written artifact from you. Not a config screenshot, not a log dump, a document that says that thing out loud. Defined. This one eats contractors alive. Defined means you have a specific value sitting in your documentation somewhere. A number, a frequency, an actual parameter. When an objective says something like the frequency of reviews of access permissions is defined, the assessor is going to open your policy. They're going to look for a line that says quarterly, every 90 days, monthly, whatever it is you have committed to. You know what's not defined as appropriate periodically on a regular basis? Every periodically sitting in your policy right now is a potential not met. Next up is specified. This is a close cousin of defined. You've named something explicitly, a list, a method, a value. You've committed to that in writing. Then we have documented. This is a formal written record somewhere that exists. An SSP, a procedure, a policy. It's straightforward, but you would be surprised how many orgs have the process, but they have never written it down. Then there's established. And this one trips people up because it goes beyond a document. Established means that a formal program exists in your environment. Not just a file, but a program. You have roles, scope, and owner. There is a canyon of difference between we have an incident response plan and we have an incident response program. One is a PDF. Very few people have probably opened it since it was written. The other has people assigned to it who know their roles. Established wants the second thing. Next up, we have identified. And identified means a list of something exists. Privilege accounts identified, where's the list? COI assets identified, hand over the inventory. And here's the domino effect that you're probably not being warned about. If you don't have that list somewhere, your assessors can't often evaluate the objectives that depend on that list. No privileged account list means they can't verify MFA coverage across privileged accounts. So one missing inventory can cascade into 3 or 4 not mets in the objectives. Described. This is a written narrative, typically in your SSP, not a network diagram with arrows. Describe, talk about it, prose, actual words explaining how something works in the environment. Then we have developed. This is a completed artifact, not the NIST template that you downloaded, you never filled it in, not a draft that has the word draft in the header. They want a finished document. Now here is the golden rule of the CMMC verb test. And this is the thing that would have saved that 500-person org I mentioned. A policy can't satisfy an operational keyword. A log can't satisfy a documentation keyword. If your verb says enforced, your MFA policy alone is not the answer. If it says defined, your SIM dashboard is not the answer. Wrong type of evidence. Match the evidence to the verb. That's 80% of the battle. Next up, we have operational keywords. And this is the second bucket in that verb test. The operational keywords, these are the prove it's actually running verbs. Your assessor doesn't want to read about your control here. They want to see it breathing, living, doing its job. Monitored is the first one. This means the thing is happening live right now. Logs are flowing. Alerts are firing when they should be. I worked with an org that told me they were monitoring their CUI environment. Pulled up the SIM. It hadn't ingested logs from a certain endpoint category in 11 days. That's not monitored. That's abandoned. There was no alert about that failure. And if your monitoring has a gap like that, you've probably written yourself a not met. Implemented means the technical control physically exists in your environment. A configuration export, a GPO, a conditional access policy. It's there and it's switched on. If you can't show it to your assessor in the console that it is actually implemented, it's not implemented. Enforced. This one is the one that burns people who think they're ready a lot of time. Enforced doesn't mean it's configured and ready. It means it's actively blocking. So you have a conditional access policy that requires MFA. That is implemented. Showing that someone who tries to log in without MFA, they get bounced, that is enforced. Your assessor needs to see that denial, the proof that it's working. Not the rule, the denial, that forced occurrence, that happening. There's a big difference. Now, protected means a protection mechanisms covers everything in scope. Not most things, not the servers, we left out the workstations. If you've got one laptop in your CUI boundary without endpoint protection, protected fails. The word all in your policy does a lot of silent work in these objectives. Performed and conducted now, they both mean that the activity occurred and you can prove it. Tickets, records, scan results, dated, scoped. For an example, we did a vulnerability scan, that's a claim. A scan report with a timestamp, the target list, the findings, that's evidence. Know the difference between the two. Maintained is the verb that catches people who are trying to cram and push their preparation into a short period of time. Because maintained wants a pattern over time, not a snapshot just from last Tuesday. Don't show one backup log from this morning. Show 3 months of backup logs when your policy says it happens once a month, for an example. Every day you wait to start doing some of these logging activities, it's a day you can't get back when it comes to maintained. The clock for maintained starts the day you sign that DFAR 7012 clause in that CMMC contract. If you stood up your entire compliance program in the last 90 days, you're going to have to make sure you work and start planning so you can show maintain. You can't fake a track record. Now, tested is exactly what it sounds like. Actual test results. Your incident response plan is tested. Where are the tabletop exercise notes? Where's the report? Your backups are tested. Show me a date with a restore test, a pass-fail outcome. No amount of policy language substitutes for test results. Either you ran the test or you didn't. Now, the last three context words can trip you up because they don't sit cleanly into either of those previous two buckets. Their meaning shifts a little bit depending on what's around them in the assessment guide. You've got to read the neighboring objectives, not just the one you're focused on. So, controlled. Ask yourself when you look at it, am I controlling a technical object or a process? If it's technical, network traffic, session behavior, information flow, your assessor wants to see the configuration, the firewall rule, the DOP policy, whatever the mechanism is doing the controlling. But if it's a process or a category, like CUI flow broadly, go look at the objective sitting right next to it, above and below it. 9 times out of 10, you're going to see a defined sub-objective right there. That means you need the written rule and the enforcement mechanism, both of them. Unfortunately, this is where contractors often hand over half of an answer and they genuinely think they're done. And half is not going to pass the assessment. Then we have authorized. Almost always a two-partner also. And almost always catches people who only prepare one of those parts. You need an approval record, someone with the authority who formally signed off, and the technical system restricting things only to what was approved. So for remote and access and wireless access, authorization doesn't happen after the connection gets established. It needs to happen before. If your approval process happens after the connection, that objective is failing. Next, we have reviewed. And this one almost never flies solo. Look at the objectives around it again. There's going to be a companion that says something like a defined review process exists. Your assessor is checking two separate things here. Is the review process documented? Who does it? How often? What triggers? How do they escalate? And then separately, did those reviews actually happen the way you said they would? Is it repeatable? Is it a mature process? You point at your SIM dashboard and you say, reviewed. You're giving your assessor rope to hang you with. If no one's looking at it, that's a problem. Who was looking at it? When? What did they do when they found something? If you can't answer all of those three, you're not satisfying that keyword. So here's what I want you to do right now. Before you close this tab, go pick a single control, whatever one that you're most nervous about. Pull up the CMMC assessment guide, again at the link in the description. Find the objectives underneath that control and run the CMMC verb test. For every documentation keyword, does that written artifact actually exist? Not a draft in somebody's OneDrive, a final published approved document. For every operational keyword, can you prove today, right now, that it is running across the in-scope systems? Then hit it with the same story test. If your SSP says one thing, your IT team says something slightly different, and your configuration shows a third, you've got a potential gap. And your assessor is going to find every one of those gaps in 90 days or whenever they show up for that audit. Your question now, can you find all of these gaps? Are you going to pay a C3PO to find them for you? Now, I've put together a CMMC Verb Test field manual. Every keyword, what evidence type it maps to, and the most common mistakes I see for each one. The link for that is in the description. Grab it, print it, tape it next to your monitor, use it every time you prepare an objective. The rubric for this test is public. Verbs are telling you exactly what to bring.